A single dad stands in line, heart sinking, as he realizes he can't afford tickets to the theme park his daughter's been dreaming of, until a stranger steps forward, buys them all, and changes everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The sun had barely crested over the horizon when Jack Carter tightened the last strap on Lily's little pink backpack and slung it over his shoulder. She was bouncing beside him, too excited to walk straight, her curls bobbing with every hop. Today was the day, the one he'd promised her weeks ago. Everbright Theme Park. Rides, cotton candy, music, laughter, the whole dream. He forced a smile as he took her hand, the worn wallet in his back pocket feeling heavier than usual. "I packed us snacks, remember?" Jack said, trying to keep the worry out of his voice as they crossed the gravel lot toward the line of cars forming at the park gates. "And I bet the roller coaster's even bigger than the pictures." Lily beamed up at him, her cheeks already flushed from excitement. "I can't wait! You remembered my favorite ride, right?" "The spinning teacups," Jack said, grinning. "How could I forget?" What she didn't know, what he'd spent the last 2 nights agonizing over, was that the cost of entry had gone up. He'd double-checked the website, calculated every coupon, every discount. Even with that, it was going to be tight. Too tight. He'd pulled a few extra shifts at the auto shop, skipped his own meals more than once. But even so, when he stopped at the ticket prices posted on the giant board near the entrance, his stomach dropped. They were higher. Again. Jack stepped out of the line, just far enough to pull his wallet out and double-count the cash. Bills folded and refolded, a handful of coins in a side pouch. He looked over at Lily now, standing near a cluster of balloons, her eyes wide with wonder, oblivious to his silence. She trusted him, believed in him, and all he'd wanted was one perfect day to make her feel like the world hadn't forgotten them. He swallowed the lump forming in his throat. Maybe there was a cheaper option. A partial day pass? A promo he'd missed? Then the line moved forward, and Jack realized he had no answers, only a promise, and a little girl still waiting to have it kept. Lily practically burst out of the car before Jack had finished parking. Her boots hit the pavement with a clumsy little hop, and she turned toward the towering gates of Everbright Theme Park like she'd stumbled into a dream. The early morning sunlight glinted off the colorful banners flapping in the wind blues and reds and yellows dancing above the ticket booths. Laughter echoed faintly in the distance, though the gates hadn't even opened yet. "Dad, look!" she shouted, pointing at the enormous Ferris wheel peeking over the fence. "It goes all the way into the sky." Jack chuckled as he climbed out of the car, rubbing his hands together to fight the bite of the chilly morning air. "Yeah? And I think I saw the moon waving from the top." Lily giggled and ran in a tight circle before dashing to his side. She was wearing the Minnie Mouse shirt they'd found at the thrift store 2 weeks ago, and she'd insisted on bringing her sparkly plastic sunglasses, even though it was barely warm enough for short sleeves. "Do you think we'll see the princess parade?" she asked, slipping her small hand into his. "And the dancing bears? And the bubble show?" Jack squeezed her hand gently. "If we time it right, we'll see it all." He didn't let his smile falter, even as he turned toward the trunk of the car and quietly pulled out a worn envelope, tucked deep under the spare blanket. Inside was everything he had scraped together: loose bills, crumpled 1s and 5s, and the last of his tip money from the garage. It wasn't much, but he'd been sure it would cover tickets. Had to. While Lily chased the reflection of her sunglasses on the car door, Jack flipped through the money, counting under his breath. He didn't like doing this in front of her. He tried to keep the weight of things hidden, tucked safely behind smiles and stories. Still short. A few dollars. Maybe 5. He glanced up at the growing line. People were filing in, kids bouncing like Lily, parents checking phones and sipping coffee. Jack folded the money back into the envelope and shoved it into his jacket pocket. Lily bounced beside him, full of hope and sugar dreams. And Jack? Jack swallowed his worry like bitter medicine and joined the line, her hand still wrapped in his, doing everything he could to make this day real. The line inched forward, slow and steady, like it didn't care that Jack's chest was tightening with every step. The smell of popcorn wafted through the air, sugary and warm, while kids squealed behind him, their excitement spilling over like soda fizz. Lily was humming beside him, eyes scanning everything at once, the park map display, the costumed characters wandering past the gates, the shimmering archway that marked the official start of magic. Jack clutched the envelope in his coat pocket, fingers numb from more than just the cold. He'd counted the cash 3 times in the car, still short. Barely $5, but $5 might as well have been 500 right now. He'd prayed the prices hadn't changed, that maybe the woman at the counter would take pity, or that some promo would magically apply. But the board was clear, no discounts today. Full price, no exceptions. Next please, the attendant called out from the booth, cheerful and brisk. Jack stepped forward, holding Lily's hand a little too tightly. 2 tickets, please, he said, forcing his voice to stay calm. He didn't want Lily to hear the worry. The woman punched something into her screen. That'll be $84.99. Jack blinked. I thought the weekday price. Special event today, she cut in, apologetic but unmoved. All standard tickets are upgraded. Sorry. He nodded slowly, reaching into his pocket, pulling out the envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. He handed over the bills, counting silently again as he passed them through the slot. The woman took them, brows furrowing as she flipped through. I'm sorry, she said, her voice softening. You're just a little short. Jack opened his mouth, then closed it. His throat tightened. Behind him, Lily had gone quiet. Daddy? She asked, tugging at his coat. Is everything okay? He crouched slightly, trying to smile. Yeah, sweetheart, just checking something. He turned back to the attendant. Is there any way to do 1 ticket? Or... His voice cracked. Is there a kid's price? She shook her head gently. Not today. Jack looked down at Lily. She was watching him now, not with fear, but confusion. That was worse. He stood frozen, helpless, as the line behind them shifted impatiently. The magic just inches away, and still somehow out of reach. Jack felt the sting behind his eyes before he could stop it. He nodded stiffly at the attendant, starting to gather the bills back into the envelope, fingers fumbling, throat locked tight. The line behind him shifted again, quiet murmurs, a sigh or two, but then came a voice. Clear, calm, confident. Add 2 more tickets. My treat. Jack turned, startled. The woman behind them stepped forward, handing a sleek black card across the counter like it was nothing. She looked like someone who didn't wait in line stall, polished, and effortlessly put together in a navy peacoat and soft gray scarf. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun, a phone tucked under her arm, designer sunglasses perched atop her head. But it wasn't the clothes or the credit card that caught Jack off guard, it was her eyes. Steady, kind. I saw what happened, she said gently. Please, let me. Jack blinked. No, I thank you, but that's really not. She held up a hand, a small smile softening her features. It's not charity, it's just a gift, one parent to another. Jack hesitated, his pride screaming, even as Lily tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, can she come with us? That made the woman chuckle. Only if you don't mind sharing your day, she said, glancing down at Lily with a wink. The attendant, sensing Jack's hesitation, looked between them. Sir? She's already paid. Jack exhaled slowly, meeting the woman's gaze. I don't even know your name. Claire, she said. Claire Bennett. He offered a hand, still stunned. Jack, this is Lily. Hi, Lily, Claire said, crouching slightly. Ready for some fun? Lily beamed. The teacups. Jack stood there a moment longer, still not sure how this was happening. Then Claire motioned toward the gate. Shall we? And just like that, the turnstile clicked open. Jack stepped through, holding Lily's hand tight and walking beside a stranger who just made the impossible feel easy. Inside the gates, the world shifted. Music floated from hidden speakers in the trees, and bubbles drifted lazily through the air like magic had been bottled and released just for today. Children darted around in bursts of laughter, Parents trailed behind with tired smiles, and the smell of churros and popcorn curled warm and sweet through the morning breeze. Lily was already tugging at Jack's hand, her eyes wide, locked onto a towering display of spinning rides and flashing lights ahead. But Jack couldn't stop glancing at the woman walking beside them, Claire Bennett. The name had a polished ring to it, like something off the cover of a magazine. She walked with ease, hands tucked casually into her coat pockets, her gaze drifting around the park with quiet amusement. Not like someone trying to impress. More like someone who didn't have to. "So," she said, catching his glance with a small smile, "you look like you're waiting for me to reveal I'm part of some elaborate prank." Jack gave a half laugh. "Honestly, I'm not sure what to make of you yet." She nodded thoughtfully. "Fair. I know how it looked back there. No one likes being saved in front of a crowd." He raised an eyebrow. "And yet, you did it anyway," Claire shrugged. "I've got a soft spot for dads who clearly adore their daughters." Jack looked down at Lily, now dancing a few steps ahead of them, arms outstretched like she was flying. "She's my whole world." Claire's smile faded into something gentler. "I could tell." They paused near a bench, and Claire turned to face him fully. "Listen, I didn't do it to make you feel uncomfortable. I just saw a little girl about to lose a moment she'd remember forever, and a father trying his damnedest not to let that happen." Jack studied her, trying to read between the lines. She didn't feel like a stranger, not exactly, but she didn't fit anywhere in his world either. "So what's your story?" he asked quietly. Claire tilted her head. "Let's just say, I came here hoping for a little escape of my own." Jack didn't reply, not right away. The park swirled around them in motion and light, and beside him stood a woman who, with one quiet act, had turned his hardest morning into something else entirely. He just didn't know what yet. They strolled past a cotton candy cart, the sugary scent trailing behind them like a ribbon, and Jack was still wrestling with the awkward knot in his chest. He couldn't decide if he was more grateful or embarrassed. Probably both. Claire walked beside him with that same effortless grace, hands still tucked into her coat pockets like none of this was out of the ordinary. "So," Jack said, breaking the silence, "you don't have to stick with us, you know. You've already done more than enough." Claire glanced sideways at him, arching an eyebrow. "And miss out on the teacups? Not a chance." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Seriously, I don't want to take up your day." She stopped walking for a moment, causing him to stop too. Her gaze met his calm, steady. "Jack, I didn't come here with a plan. No meetings to get to, no calls to return. Just wanted some air and maybe a little joy. Turns out, I found both faster than expected. But," he started, motioning vaguely between them, "I don't want you to feel obligated." Claire smiled, that same gentle curve of her lips that didn't ask for anything in return. "I don't do charity. I do kindness. There's a difference." Jack stood quiet for a beat, the noise of the park washing over him, laughing kids, the distant whistle of a train, the soft hum of music. Lily had darted ahead again, staring wide-eyed at a row of costumed princesses dancing near the castle stage. "Okay," he said finally, the tension in his shoulders easing just a bit. "If you're sure." "I'm sure," Claire said. Then she grinned. "Besides, every princess needs a proper royal escort. Looks like Lily's got two now." Jack followed her gaze and watched as Lily spun in place, mimicking the princess's twirls with abandon. For a moment, all the stress, all the second-guessing, fell away. Claire stepped beside him again, voice low but light. "Let me buy the churros, too. You can get the next round." He laughed under his breath. "Deal." And just like that, the most unlikely agreement was made. Not with contracts or handshakes, but with shared smiles, spinning teacups, and a promise that, for today, none of them would feel alone. The carousel glimmered like a childhood memory, brought to life, brass poles shining in the sunlight, painted horses frozen mid-gallop, music box notes twinkling through the air, like they were laced with magic. Lily had chosen a white horse with gold trim and a pink saddle, and she waved like royalty as the ride began to spin. Jack stood beside her, one hand on the pole, the other resting on the edge of the saddle to steady her. Across the way, Claire had climbed onto a sleek black horse, laughing as she pretended to race Lily around the circle. "Faster!" Lily shouted, eyes wide with joy. "We're winning, Daddy!" Claire leaned forward dramatically, clutching her reins like she was in the Kentucky Derby. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Jack laughed, really laughed, the sound catching him off guard. It had been too long since he'd heard it come from his own chest without effort. Too long since a moment felt this simple. As the carousel spun, the world outside blurred people, noise, everything, and for a few minutes all that existed were the lights, the music, and the laughter that echoed like something fragile and precious. "You two make a pretty unbeatable team," Claire called across to him as their horses rose and fell. Jack met her eyes, smiling without hesitation this time. "She keeps me in line." "I believe it," Claire said, and something in her gaze softened. The ride slowed, easing to a gentle stop. Lily clapped her hands and leaned into Jack as he helped her down, her cheeks flushed from the wind. Claire stepped off her horse and joined them, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That was awesome," Lily said breathlessly. "Can we go again later?" "Absolutely," Jack said, tightening her jacket zipper. "Maybe after we find that bubble show you've been talking about." Claire looked at him, her voice quieter now. "You're good with her, it shows." Jack shifted, a little embarrassed. "I try." "No," she said, her tone sincere. "You love her out loud. That's rare." Something shifted then, not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle ripple in the air between them. For the first time since they'd met, Jack stopped wondering why she was here, and started being glad that she was. By noon, the park had come alive in a way that felt almost unreal, sunlight glinting off ride tracks, the sound of roller coasters rattling overhead, the scent of fried dough and caramel thick in the air. It was the kind of day people took pictures of to remember. The kind Jack usually watched from the sidelines, never quite part of. But not today. Today, he stood with cotton candy stuck to his fingers, a half-eaten funnel cake in one hand, and his daughter's laughter echoing like music in his ears. Lily darted ahead, her cheeks dusted pink from sugar and excitement, skipping in circles around the water fountain that sprayed rainbow-colored mist into the air. "We have to ride the rocket ship next," she called back, her arms stretched out like wings. Jack looked over at Claire, who had just finished tying her scarf tighter against the breeze. She raised an eyebrow. "You ready for liftoff, Dad?" He smirked. "I think my stomach's still recovering from that spinning galaxy ride." Claire laughed, brushing a bit of powdered sugar off her sleeve. "You looked green," Jack nodded solemnly. "I was green." They both burst into laughter, the kind that comes easy when the walls have started to fall. It didn't feel awkward anymore. It didn't feel like he owed her anything, or like she was just passing through. Somewhere between the third ride and the second cotton candy, they'd started moving as one uniton, planned, unspoken, natural. Claire knelt beside Lily to tie her shoelace, her fingers quick and gentle. "All right, Captain Lily," she said with a mock salute. "Lead the way." Jack watched the two of them, his daughter, and this stranger who didn't feel like a stranger anymore, and something swelled quietly in his chest. Joy, yes, but something else, too. Something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. Lily grabbed both their hands as they reached the line for the rocket ride, tugging them forward. "Let's all sit together." Jack nodded, letting her pull him along. Claire's hand brushed his briefly, light as a breeze. And for the first time in a long while, Jack didn't feel like a man just getting by. He felt like a man who was part of something, something small. Something special, something that sparkled. They found a quiet bench tucked beneath the shade of a wide maple tree near the edge of the park, away from the crowds and noise. The rocket ride had left Lily flushed and sleepy, and she now dozed peacefully in Jack's lap, her head resting against his chest, her fingers still clutching a souvenir glow wand. Jack smoothed her curls gently, his eyes fixed on some point in the distance that wasn't really there. Claire sat beside him, sipping a bottle of water, giving him space but not leaving. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind that didn't demand to be filled. "She doesn't know," Jack said quietly, after a long pause, "about how close we were to not getting through those gates today. She just sees the fun." Claire didn't respond right away, letting the moment settle. "She shouldn't have to know," he added. "That's my job." Claire glanced at him. "You carry a lot, don't you?" Jack nodded, eyes still on Lily. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Car accident. One moment she was there, and the next, she wasn't." Claire's face softened, the quiet sympathy in her expression saying more than any words could. "I didn't know what the hell I was doing," Jack continued. "Still don't, most days. I was 28, had a toddler who didn't understand why her mom wasn't coming back, and no idea how to pay for the mortgage. I sold the house. Took a job at the auto shop my buddy owned. Then a second job doing deliveries at night just to stay afloat." He let out a bitter laugh, low and quiet. "You'd be amazed how many things you can live without when you have to." Claire didn't interrupt. She simply listened, really, listened in, a way that made him feel like his story wasn't just something sad to politely acknowledge, but something worth understanding. "I try to make life feel normal for her. Happy. But sometimes, I wonder if she sees through it." "She sees that you show up," Claire said gently. "Every day, that counts more than anything." Jack looked at her then, really looked. And for once, he didn't feel like he was just a man telling a story. He felt like someone being seen. Lily was still sleeping, curled up now with her head in Claire's lap, the soft hum of the park drifting around them like a lullaby. Jack leaned back against the bench, arms crossed loosely, his earlier confession still lingering in the air between them. He hadn't meant to spill that much. But with Claire, it hadn't felt like spilling it, had felt like setting something down. He glanced at her, unsure if he should say more, when she spoke softly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "You're not the only one who's tired of pretending," Claire said. Jack tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her fingers still in Lily's hair. "I don't talk about this much. Not because it's a secret, but because most people don't really want to hear it." "I'm not most people," Jack said quietly. That earned him the faintest smile. "I was supposed to get married last year," she began. "Nice guy. Smart, charming. My parents loved him. He looked good on paper, like the final piece to a picture-perfect life. What happened?" Claire shrugged. "He loved the idea of me, not the actual me. And I think deep down, I knew it. But I kept going through the motions anyway. You know that feeling? When you look around your life and realize none of it feels like yours?" Jack nodded slowly. "Every day for a while." Claire sighed. "I called it off 2 weeks before the wedding, packed up, walked out of my office, and told my assistant to cancel everything. I've been on the move ever since." "Your office?" Jack asked, a note of curiosity in his voice. She smiled, almost shy. "I run a consulting firm. Big clients, big contracts, lots of money, not a lot of meaning. I've been playing this role so long, I forgot what it felt like to be human." Jack watched her closely now. The polished exterior, the perfect posturate all softened in the edges of that confession. "And today?" he asked. Claire looked down at Lily, who shifted in her sleep, murmuring something about cotton candy and stars. "Today," Claire said, her voice quieter now, "felt real." And in that shared silence, Jack knew exactly what she meant. The log flume ride hadn't been part of the original planet that there really was one. But Lily had spotted the twisting water track and shrieked with delight before either adult could object. The sign had warned, "You will get wet," but it had underestimated the level of drenched they'd be walking away with. Now, standing near a row of hand dryers that barely worked, Jack shook water from his hair, shirt clinging to his back, jeans soggy and heavy. Claire stood beside him, mascara slightly smudged, and laughing like she hadn't in years. "That was definitely not just a light splash," she said, pushing her wet hair out of her face. "False advertising." Jack agreed, grinning as he squeezed the hem of his shirt. I think that drop was taller than my house. Lily ran in wild circles around them, arms stretched like airplane wings, her little rain poncho fluttering behind her like a cape. We got soaked. That was awesome. Claire reached down to high-five her, and Lily leapt up to meet her palm mid-spin. We are the Splash Squad, she announced. Jack laughed, shaking his head. You two are going to catch a cold. Claire raised an eyebrow. Then we'll match. There was something about the way she said we that settled into Jack's chest with an unexpected warmth. She wasn't playing the part of a helpful stranger anymore. She wasn't just the woman who had bought their tickets and stayed out of politeness. She was part of it now, the inside jokes, the spontaneous choices, the wet clothes and shared laughter. And somehow she fit right in. Jack watched her as she crouched down beside Lily, helping her tie one soaked sneaker. Claire looked comfortable. Not just physically, her designer coat weighed down and damp, but emotionally. Like she belonged in the middle of this messy, joyful chaos. He didn't know what this day meant to her. He wasn't sure what it meant to him, but every minute made it harder to imagine the park without her in it. Claire stood up, brushing water off her knees. Next ride? Jack met her gaze, still smiling. Yeah, he said, voice low but certain. Let's keep going. Late afternoon, light filtered through the treetops, turning the park gold and warm, softening everything it touched. The chaos of the day had mellowed into something quieter, more intimate. Rides still spun and music still played, but there was a calmness now, like the whole place had exhaled after a long laugh. Jack sat on the edge of a fountain with Lily curled up beside him, her energy finally winding down. He held a cherry slushie in one hand, its condensation dripping slowly down his wrist, while Lily clutched a giant stuffed bear. They'd won at a ring toss booth earlier. Well, Claire had won it, somehow landing 3 perfect throws in a row. She was standing just a few steps away, her phone in hand, watching them with a small smile. Jack didn't notice at first. He was too busy listening to Lily explain how she was going to name the bear Captain Fuzz and take him to school on Monday, no matter what her teacher said. Claire lifted her phone slowly, quietly, and snapped the photo. It was one of those rare moments that didn't look posed because it wasn't. Jack had his head tilted down slightly, smiling as Lily leaned into him, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. His hand was resting gently on her back, protective without being possessive. The sunlight caught in their hair, and there was something about the look on his face, unguarded, content, that made Claire pause. She looked at the image for a long second, her chest tightening in a way she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just sweet, it was real. A snapshot of something tender and true. Jack looked up then, catching her with the phone in her hand. Were you taking a picture of us? He asked, not accusing, just surprised. Claire's eyes flicked to his, a little sheepish. Guilty, he raised an eyebrow. Do I at least get to see it? She walked over and handed him the phone. He stared at the image, quiet. Something in him shifted as he took it in, something small but powerful. The man in the photo looked happy. Not just surviving. Happy. I forgot what that looked like, he murmured. Claire sat beside him. You never lost it. You just haven't had enough reasons to see it. And in that still moment between rides and reality, Jack knew this day would stay with him far longer than just a photo ever could. They found a tucked-away picnic table near one of the quieter food stalls, just beyond the main path, where the noise faded into a distant hum. Jack carried the tray, 2 burgers, a grilled cheese, and a mountain of fries that Lily insisted they share family style. Claire had snagged a lemonade for herself and a chocolate milk for Lily, who was now preoccupied dipping fries into both with equal curiosity and zero concern for flavor. Jack took a bite of his burger, his eyes drifting to the families passing by. He wondered how many of them had saved for this day the same way he had, or if most people just bought tickets without thinking twice. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten out without calculating how long it would stretch his budget. Claire broke the silence gently. You know, for someone who's been through a lot, you still laugh like someone who hasn't given up. Jack glanced at her, a little caught off guard. That's not what it feels like most days. I know, she said, stirring her lemonade with the straw. But it's there, underneath everything. He leaned back slightly, chewing slowly. It's easier when she's happy. She gives me something to aim for. Claire nodded, her gaze settling on Lily as she stacked fries into a leaning tower. What about for you, though? Jack frowned. What do you mean? I mean, do you ever dream for yourself anymore? Not just for her, not just survival. He looked down at his food, quiet. It was a question no one had asked him in years, not since before Rachel died. Not since his life had narrowed to paychecks, school lunches, and exhaustion. Dreaming had become a luxury, something reserved for people who could afford it. I don't really think about it, he said finally. Dreams don't keep the lights on. No, Claire agreed softly. But sometimes they remind you why the lights are worth keeping on. Jack glanced at her, and for the first time that day, he didn't feel like she was just being kind. He felt like she understood. He didn't answer right away. But the question stayed with him lingering, nudging something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. Possibility. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the trees, casting a golden hue across the park. Shadows stretched long over the cobblestone paths, and the soft buzz of anticipation lingered in the air like static. Jack noticed how the energy subtly shifted as evening approached. Kids were a little quieter now, clutching plush toys and half-melted treats, and parents walked slower, savoring what was left of the day. Claire tapped him on the shoulder, grinning. I have a surprise. Jack gave her a mock, suspicious look. Another one? You've already set the bar pretty high. This one's just a little extra sparkle, she said. Fireworks. VIP section. Best seats in the house. He blinked. VIP? Claire, those seats are impossible to get. You have to book them months in advance. Claire just sipped her lemonade and shrugged, that same nonchalant grace she wore like a second skin. Let's just say, I know someone who knows someone. Jack didn't press, but the words sat differently this time. The ease with which she navigated the day. The way staff smiled at her, as if recognizing someone familiar. The kind of calm confidence that wasn't practiced at it was earned. He'd known plenty of people with money at the shop, people who made it clear the world bent for them. Claire wasn't like that, but there was something elevated. Subtle, but unmistakable. You sure you're not secretly the owner of this park? He asked, half teasing, half fishing. She laughed, brushing the comment aside. Hardly, but I may have been here once or twice. Lily, now bouncing beside them, looked up with wide eyes. Fireworks? We're going to the special seats? Yep, Claire said, reaching down to fix the strap on Lily's shoe. You'll be so close. You'll feel like you can touch the stars. Jack watched her, this woman who had come out of nowhere and stitched herself into their day so seamlessly. He didn't know everything about her, clearly, but what he did know was this. She hadn't just given Lily a magical day. She was starting to give him one too, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. They were near the carousel again when Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned, just briefly, but Jack caught the flicker in her expression before she masked it. Hey, she said, her voice dropping to something quieter. I need to take this. Just give me a second. Jack nodded. We'll be right here. Lily was busy trying to decide whether to ride the white unicorn or the sea dragon this time, oblivious to anything else. Jack took a seat on a nearby bench, his eyes casually following Claire as she walked a few steps away, stopping beneath a tree just out of sight from the ride attendants. He didn't mean to listen. Not really. But the wind carried her voice, and something in her tone measured, restrained, not quite the carefree woman he'd spent the day with made his ears perk. No. I told you I wasn't coming back until tomorrow, she said, sharp but hushed. Yes, I'm with someone. No, not like that. It's different. A pause. I know what's at stake, Ben. I'm not just walking away. I just need a day where no one's following me with a clipboard. Jack's brow furrowed. Ben? Claire's back was to him, her posture tight. She rubbed her temple as she spoke, pacing slightly. I'll sign the contract. But not tonight. I can't be that person right now. Another pause. Softer now. I needed this. Then, silence. She ended the call, pocketed the phone, and stood there for a moment with her eyes closed, as if trying to shake the weight off before she walked back. Jack looked away before she caught him watching. But something had changed. The mystery he'd sensed earlier wasn't just a feeling, it was real. Contracts? Following her? Who was she? Claire returned a moment later, smile back in place, as if nothing had happened. Crisis averted, she said, brushing it off. Jack nodded slowly, the warmth from earlier still present but now tangled with unease. Something about her world was much bigger than he'd thought. And suddenly, he wasn't sure where he fit inside it. They wandered toward a quieter part of the park, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, washing everything in soft amber light. The buzz of the day had mellowed, families gathering for the fireworks, kids rubbing tired eyes, the scent of kettle corn thick in the air. Jack walked beside Claire in silence. Lily a few steps ahead, chasing the last of the bubbles drifting through the air from a nearby vendor. He didn't want to ruin the mood. But the words had been sitting on his tongue since the phone call. You okay? He asked, keeping his voice low. Claire glanced over, nodding. Yeah, just work stuff. Jack hesitated. Then, gently, carefully, he said, You don't have to tell me, but that didn't sound like just work. She exhaled a slow, deliberate breath. It's complicated. I've got time. Claire stopped walking and turned toward him, hands deep in the pockets of her coat. You've probably figured it out by now, she said, voice steady. I'm not just someone who happens to know someone at a theme park. Jack offered a half smile. It crossed my mind. I'm from a very different world than this, she continued. Big offices, board meetings, contracts worth more than some small towns. I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who only see the name, the bank account, or what I can give them. Jack didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He just listened. And I got tired, she said, eyes drifting toward the horizon. Tired of being a Bennett, tired of being invited to things so people could say they knew me. I started wondering what would happen if I just stopped showing up, if I let people meet me without the packaging. Jack nodded slowly. So today was about seeing if I could still connect with people who didn't want anything from me, Claire said softly. People who weren't performing or posturing, just being. Jack looked at her, really looked, and for the first time her guarded polish seemed to fall away completely. All he saw was the woman who'd tied Lily's shoe, laughed on the carousel, and wiped cotton candy from her coat like it didn't matter. I'm not intimidated by your world, he said. But I won't pretend I understand it. She smiled, quiet and grateful. That's exactly why I stayed. The sky had darkened to a deep navy, stars just beginning to peek through when the first firework lit up the night. It burst above the castle in a riot of gold and red, its echo rolling through the park like distant thunder. A crowd had gathered on the hill just beyond the lake, but Jack, Claire, and Lily sat nestled in the VIP section. Claire had somehow made a pier, their bench cushioned and tucked perfectly beneath a canopy of trees that framed the sky like a stage. Lily sat between them, her eyes wide and shimmering in the glow of the explosions. She held onto Claire's hand with one, and Jack's with the other, her head resting lightly against Jack's shoulder. Whoa, she whispered as a fountain of blue sparks cascaded down in slow motion. It's like the sky is dancing, Claire smiled, glancing down at her. It is, just for you. More fireworks followed, brighter, louder, grander, some shaped like hearts, others like stars. Jack found himself less focused on the show, and more on the weight of Lily's small body leaning into his, the warmth of her hand in his own, the quiet calm that had settled over Claire's face. For a moment, he let himself forget the mortgage, the grocery lists, the next paycheck. He forgot the uneven balance of their worlds. All he could feel was this three people wrapped in the glow of something rare and good. As the grand finale began, Lily's eyelids fluttered. She fought to stay awake through the final burst of gold that painted the entire sky, but by the time the applause rippled through the crowd, her head had slipped down onto Claire's lap, her breathing soft and even. Claire didn't move. She just rested a hand gently on Lily's back, her other arm brushing Jack's as they sat in the fading light of the fireworks. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. In the quiet that followed, Jack looked over at Claire, and she looked back. And in that still, starlit silence, something passed between them, something honest, quiet, and unspoken. They weren't strangers anymore. They were something else. The park was nearly empty now. The once vibrant noise dulled to quiet footsteps and the occasional murmur of goodbyes. Twinkling lights lined the walkways, casting a soft glow on the cobblestones as Jack carried a sleeping Lily in his arms. Her head rested on his shoulder, her sticky hands still clutching the edge of her souvenir bag, the stuffed bear's nose peeking out. Claire walked beside them, slower now, as if matching his pace without thinking. Neither of them spoke, both caught in that fragile space where a perfect day starts to slip into memory. Jack shifted Lily slightly and looked ahead at the glowing exit gates. That was it, the edge of the fairy tale. Beyond those gates, the real world waited: grocery lists, work shifts, empty gas tanks. He felt it creeping back in already, like gravity returning after a moment of weightlessness. Claire seemed to feel it too. She reached into her bag, pulling out her car keys and a small card. "I had my driver bring the car around," she said quietly. "I can give you both a ride home." Jack shook his head gently. "We're not far. She'll be asleep before we hit the end of the block anyway." Claire smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course. They reached the edge of the lot, where her sleek black SUV idled under a street lamp. Jack stopped, adjusting Lily one more time. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. "So, this is it?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Claire hesitated. "I guess so." Jack looked at her, this woman, who had stepped into his life for one unexpected day, and somehow made it feel fuller, lighter. He hadn't wanted to expect anything. He wasn't sure he should. But still, he felt it, the familiar tug of something slipping away before you're ready. "I don't really know how to say thank you for today," he said. "You don't have to," Claire replied. Then, after a beat, "I needed it too." He nodded, unsure what else to say. Claire hesitated one last time. "Good night, Jack." And before he could answer, she leaned in, kissed Lily's forehead, then turned and disappeared into the car. Jack watched the SUV pull away, its taillights glowing like the last flicker of the fireworks. And just like that, the magic was gone. The morning sun crept in through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the kitchen counter where Jack stood, still half asleep, pouring cereal into Lily's favorite chipped bowl. The hum of the old refrigerator and the soft tapping of Lily's footsteps down the hallway were the only sounds in their small home. He felt the ache of the previous day in his shoulders, not from the walking or the rides, but from the weight of what it had meant. The kind of day that doesn't come often. The kind you try not to wish for again because wishing makes the missing harder. Lily shuffled in, her curls a mess, and her eyes still heavy with sleep. She slid into her chair and blinked at the cereal like it might grow legs. Did yesterday really happen? Jack smiled as he sat down across from her. "Pretty sure it did. I've still got damp sneakers and glitter stuck to my hoodie to prove it." She giggled softly, spoon clinking against the bowl. His phone buzzed on the counter, vibrating once, then again. He didn't think much of it until he glanced at the screen and froze. "Claire Bennett, thank you again for yesterday. Truly. If you and Lily are free today, would you want to grab lunch? My treat. No roller coasters this time." Jack stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen. She hadn't vanished after all, and somehow, that changed everything. "Who's that?" Lily asked between bites. He looked at her, still a little stunned. "It's Claire!" Her eyes lit up instantly. "Really? What'd she say?" Jack cleared his throat, smiling despite himself. "She wants to have lunch with us, just lunch." Lily clapped her hands, milk sloshing dangerously close to the edge of the bowl. "Yes. Can we go, please?" Jack hesitated. Yesterday had felt like a dream, wrapped in fireworks and laughter. Today was real life again. Bills, routines, responsibilities. But maybe, just maybe, real life had room for something more. "Yeah," he said quietly, texting back. "We'd love to." The clang of metal and the scent of motor oil brought Jack firmly back to earth. The garage was already humming when he arrived, the bay doors rolled open to let in the early light, the air sharp with the scent of cold steel, grease, and old coffee. Familiar, predictable. Every corner held something he knew: wrenches in their drawers, the soft tick of a cooling engine, and Hank, his supervisor, hunched under the hood of a beat-up Civic, like it owed him an apology. Jack clocked in, wiped his hands on a towel slung over his shoulder, and tried to shake off the surreal weight of the last 24 hours. But as soon as he stepped onto the floor, the teasing started. Well," Hank called out without looking up. "Look who finally came back from Fantasyland." Derek, the youngest guy in the shop, grinned from behind a stack of tires. "You get her number, Carter? Or did she just ride off into the sunset in her limo?" Jack rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. "Wasn't like that." "Oh, come on," Hank said, straightening up with a wrench in hand. "The guys said you were at Everbright with some mystery woman who bought your kid tickets and spent the whole day with you. Sounds a lot like a like-that situation to me." Jack grabbed a socket wrench and headed for the open Ford in Bay 3. "Lily had a good day. That's all that matters." "Uh-huh," Derek said, smirking. "Sure. So when's the wedding?" Jack shot him a look that was more amused than annoyed. "I'm not talking to children." Laughter echoed through the garage, but it was easy, harmless. Still, beneath the jokes, Jack felt that tug in his chest. Not irritation, but uncertainty. Because while they laughed about theme park lady, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Claire. How she'd slipped so naturally into his and Lily's world. How real she'd felt in the middle of a place built on fantasy. As he slid under the car and let the familiar clank of tools settle around him, Jack realized something he hadn't expected. He missed her. Already. Their first lunch had been simple sandwiches and soup at a small cafe on the corner. The kind of place with faded checkered floors and chipped mugs that were always full. Claire had shown up in jeans and a denim jacket. No driver, no heels, no fanfare. Just her. Jack had expected awkwardness, polite conversation, a brief thank you before she vanished again, but instead, she asked about Lily's favorite subject in school. She remembered her stuffed bear's name. She laughed when Jack told stories about clients who swore their engines just stopped working on their own. She wasn't pretending to be interested, she was. Lunch became dinner the following week. Then lunch again the week after that. Claire never rushed, never made him feel like he had to impress her. It wasn't about fancy places, it was about the company. And somehow, without anyone saying it aloud, they just kept showing up, and then it happened. Claire asked if she could come to Lily's school art show. "I know it's probably just a hallway full of finger paints," she said, smiling across the table, "but I'd really like to be there." Jack hesitated, but Lily answered for him, shouting from her booster seat, "Yes, you have to see my rocket ship." So Claire came. She stood in the corner of Lily's classroom, asking questions about construction paper and glitter glue like it was a museum exhibit. She clapped the loudest during the performance of Twinkle Twinkle, Outer Space Star. She hugged Lily like she'd known her for years. And she kept coming. Drop-offs, pickups, Saturday farmers markets, afternoon playground runs. She'd show up with extra snacks, a new book for Lily, or just a quiet smile and a warm hello. There was no agenda, no promises. Just presence. One afternoon, after Claire had walked Lily to class, Jack leaned against his truck, watching her with a quiet sort of wonder. He didn't know when the lunch date turned into a rhythm, when the rhythm became something steady. But it had. And with each visit, Claire didn't just step into their world. She started to feel like part of it. It started with a whisper at the bakery. Mrs. Halverson, who'd been working the counter since Jack was in high school, leaned over the glass display of cinnamon rolls and stage whispered, "Is that the woman from that finance magazine? The one always at your side lately?" Jack had chuckled awkwardly, waving it off, but the question lingered. And it didn't stop there. At the gas station, the attendant gave him a knowing look as he handed back change. "You know she's on some list of most influential women under 40, right? My sister swears she saw her give a TED Talk." Jack had pretended not to know what that meant, but he did. And now, apparently, so did everyone else. By the following weekend, Claire couldn't walk into the corner coffee shop without someone glancing up from behind their paper. Subtle double takes. Curious stares. Phones held a little too high when taking selfies. Jack noticed it all. Maple Creek wasn't the kind of town where secrets lasted long. News traveled faster than the wind, and Claire Bennett, the once unknown woman who had bought a struggling dad and his daughter theme park tickets, was now something of a legend. Still, she handled it with the same grace she seemed to carry everywhere. She smiled politely, answered questions when asked, and never once seemed flustered. If she was aware of the whispers, she didn't show it. If she was bothered, she didn't say. But Jack noticed. He noticed when she lingered a little longer outside the diner before walking in, when she hesitated just a beat before taking his hand in public, when she glanced around a little more often than she used to. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Jack's modest rental, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs, he finally asked, "Is this too much?" Claire looked at him, eyes steady. "No, but it's different." Jack nodded, understanding more than she realized. "You don't have to keep coming around if it starts feeling." She cut him off gently. "Jack, I'm not scared of small-town gossip. I've had my face on magazine covers. This is the most honest attention I've ever had." She leaned against his shoulder, and they sat in silence as the sky dimmed, the world around them quiet except for the sound of something real beginning to take root. The elevator was silent and smooth, gliding upward with barely a sound, but Jack still felt the weight in his stomach grow with each floor. Lily stood beside him, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked from a roadside stand, humming quietly to herself. Her excitement was effortless. Jack's? Not so much. When the doors opened on the top floor, it felt like stepping into another universe. Claire's penthouse was all clean lines and quiet, elegant marble floors that clicked under their shoes, high ceilings, and windows that stretched from wall to wall, pouring golden light across the room. The skyline beyond looked painted, like something from a postcard. Everything inside sparkled in a subtle, effortless way, modern, curated, untouched by the chaos of everyday life. Claire met them at the door barefoot, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that draped off one shoulder. She smiled, the same easy smile she'd worn at school drop-offs and art shows. And yet here, in her space, she looked different. "Wow," Lily whispered, eyes wide as she stepped inside. "This looks like a princess castle." Claire laughed and knelt down. "It's all show. The fridge is still full of takeout, and the closet's a mess." Jack smiled, but he couldn't ignore the quiet discomfort blooming in his chest. He moved carefully, afraid to touch anything. The couch looked more expensive than his truck. Even the air smelled expensive clean linen, sandalwood, something foreign, Claire noticed. Of course she did. "You okay?" she asked softly, stepping close. He nodded, then shook his head. "I'm trying to be." Claire reached out, taking the flowers from Lily and setting them gently in a glass vase near the window. "This isn't the part of my life that matters most," she said. "It's just where I sleep." Jack glanced around the room again, then back at her. "You really live in two different worlds, don't you?" She stepped closer, brushing a thumb over his knuckles. "Not anymore." And in that moment, with Lily twirling in circles beneath the towering windows and Claire's hand steady in his, Jack realized something. He didn't fit in her world. But somehow, she was making space for him in it anyway. The ride back to Jack's house was quiet. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head tipped to one side, cradling a coloring book Claire had given her from a fancy boutique shop downtown. Jack kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the steering wheel, the silence between him and Claire growing heavier with each passing mile. She noticed it. Of course she did. "You've barely said a word since we left," Claire said softly. Jack glanced at her, then back to the road. "Just tired." It was a lie, and they both knew it. "You didn't like being there," she said after a moment. Not accusing, just honest. Jack sighed, fingers drumming once against the wheel. "It's not that I didn't like it, it's just, I don't know, it's not me." Claire looked down at her hands. "I never meant to make you feel out of place." "You didn't," Jack said, then paused. Not on purpose. The admission hung in the air. He hadn't meant for it to sound sharp, but the truth was prickling inside him. The marble floors, the way the doorman greeted her by name, the carefully arranged bookshelves that screamed taste and money. It wasn't just that it was different, made him realize how small his world felt next to hers. "I'm just a guy who works under cars all day," he added. You sit on boards and sign contracts. I've got oil under my nails, Claire." She turned toward him, voice quieter now. "And I think about that every time I walk into your world." Jack's eyes flicked to her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't want to overstep. I don't know if the other parents at school are whispering. I don't know if I'm pulling Lily into something that complicates things. I don't know how to be in your world without ruining it." They pulled into his driveway, the porch light glowing softly against the dusk. Jack put the truck in park but didn't move. For a long moment, they sat in the quiet between two lives neither of them had asked to merge. And for the first time since they met, the space between them didn't feel magical. It felt fragile. The days that followed stretched out like damp laundry on a lines low, heavy, and full of things left unsaid. Jack buried himself in work. He picked up extra shifts at the garage, stayed late, tightening bolts that didn't need tightening, fixed cars no one was waiting on. It was easier to drown in noise than sit in the silence Claire had left behind. There hadn't been a dramatic ending, no slammed doors, no harsh words, just that final, hollow conversation in the truck, and a quiet agreement to let the space grow. She hadn't called. He hadn't texted, and Lily noticed. She didn't ask at first. But by Wednesday morning, when Claire still hadn't appeared at drop-off or after-school pickup, Lily's questions began to surface. "Is Claire sick?" "No, sweetheart," Jack said, tying her shoes a little too tightly. "She's just busy. She didn't come to show and tell," Lily said quietly, holding her stuffed bear close. "She said she would." Jack froze for half a second, then forced a smile. "I'm sure she wanted to." Lily nodded, but her small face was unreadable. By Thursday, the silence had crept into their routines. No extra books waiting in Lily's backpack, no surprise cupcakes for her class, no notes written in bright pink ink slipped into lunchboxes. Jack caught Lily staring out the window more often, lingering on the porch a little longer before heading inside after school. He missed her too, but pride was a stubborn thing, and uncertainty even worse. Jack didn't know if Claire wanted space or if she'd already decided to walk away. And part of him, the part still haunted by losing Rachel, believed that people like Claire didn't stay in places like his. So, he let the silence grow. Until one night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes and asked, "Did Claire stop liking us?" Jack's throat tightened. He didn't have a real answer. Just a truth he wasn't sure how to explain. "I think she's figuring some things out," he said softly. Lily nodded, but her fingers clutched the edge of her blanket a little tighter. And in the quiet of that moment, Jack realized the silence wasn't just hurting him. It was breaking something in her, too. It was Saturday morning when Jack found the envelope on the kitchen table. Lily had been unusually quiet all morning. her crayon spread out across the table beside a half-eaten bowl of cereal, and her favorite glitter pen resting on top of a folded sheet of paper. The envelope was addressed in big, uneven letters, Claire, with a small heart dotting the I. Jack hesitated before picking it up. Lily was curled up on the couch, watching cartoons without really watching. When he sat beside her, the paper still in his hand, she looked up with those big, hopeful eyes. "You wrote Claire a letter?" he asked gently. Lily nodded. "It's a secret, but you can read it if you want." Jack unfolded the paper, careful not to smudge the glitter ink. The handwriting wobbled in places, a few misspelled words scattered throughout, but it didn't matter. The message was clear. "Dear Claire, thank you for the best day ever at the theme park. It was like a dream I don't want to forget. I miss the teacups and the fireworks and the way you laughed when I got cotton candy in your hair. I know grown-ups get busy and sometimes go away, but I still think about you. Are we still friends? You make Daddy smile different. I hope that's okay. Love, Lily," and Captain Fuzzjack stared at the letter, throat tightening. It was simple, honest, and completely unfiltered everything he hadn't been able to say out loud, somehow written perfectly by a 7-year-old with a sparkly pen. "She really matters to you, huh?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded again. "You matter to her, too. I can tell." Jack folded the letter carefully, pressing it back into the envelope. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at it like it might explode in his hands or vanish if he looked away. Then, quietly, he said, "Let's deliver it," and Lily smiled. A small but certain light in the quiet that had gone on too long. It was just after dinner when the knock came. Jack was drying dishes in the kitchen, Lily humming softly in the other room as she brushed her doll's hair. The knock wasn't urgent, just a soft, steady rhythm, but it sent a jolt through him all the same. He wiped his hands on a towel, heart already pounding, and made his way to the front door. When he opened it, Claire was standing there. She looked differentless, polished, more real. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, no makeup, just a soft sweater and jeans. In her hands was Lily's envelope, folded carefully, the glitter heart still catching what was left of the evening light. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Claire held the letter up like it was the most precious thing in the world. "She wrote to me." Jack nodded, stepping aside without a word. She entered slowly, like she wasn't sure if she still had permission to. "She asked if we're still friends," Claire said quietly. That one sentence, it undid me. Jack leaned against the wall, watching her as she moved into the living room. Lily looked up from her dolls, her eyes widening. "Claire?" Claire crouched down beside her. "Hi, sweetheart." Lily leapt into her arms without hesitation. Claire held her tightly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I missed you so much." "I missed you more," Lily whispered. Jack looked away for a moment, his chest tightening, then stepped forward. "You didn't have to come all this way." Claire stood, facing him. "Yes, I did." There was a beat of silence, then another. "I got scared," she said. "Not of you, of what it meant, of what it could become, and I convinced myself that walking away was easier than watching something beautiful break." Jack met her eyes, something raw flickering behind his. "But Lily reminded me," she added, voice trembling, "that the good things, the real things, are always worth risking." Jack didn't say anything right away. Then he stepped closer, and gently, he said, "So, what do we do now?" Claire reached for his hand, fingers curling into his. "We start again," she whispered. "If you'll let me." The days that followed weren't filled with fireworks or theme parks. There were no grand gestures, no perfectly scripted moments, just slow mornings, shared coffees, and tentative steps, forward one quiet moment at a time. Claire didn't sweep in like a whirlwind anymore. She came over on Sunday afternoons with her hair in a bun and sleeves rolled up, helping Lily bake cookies that always came out uneven but perfect in their own way. Jack, in turn, learned to let her into the quieter parts of his life, showing her how to fix a leaky faucet, letting her ride with him on errands, talking about his mother's old recipe for cornbread as they wandered the aisles of the grocery store. They didn't call it dating, not yet. They didn't need labels or declarations. What they needed, what they chose, was to keep showing up. One Wednesday evening, Claire brought over Chinese takeout and a box of sidewalk chalk. After dinner, she and Lily covered the driveway in pastel stars and crooked castles, their laughter floating through the dusk like music Jack didn't realize he missed until he heard it again. At night, after Lily was tucked in and the house had quieted, Jack and Claire would sit on the porch. Sometimes they talked about books, or childhoods, or regrets. Sometimes they just listened to the crickets. The space between them, once filled with unspoken doubts, was now a place of rest. Not everything was solved, but everything felt possible. Jack still worried. He still wondered what it would look like for a mechanic and a business mogul to build a life in the same rhythm. But each time Claire showed up, wearing sneakers instead of heels, and asking if he wanted to go for a walk, he let that fear shrink just a little more. And Claire O'Shea stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes. She stopped explaining herself to people who didn't care to understand. With Jack, she was just Claire. No title, no mask. No need to impress. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was honest. And that made it more real than anything either of them had ever known. It was one of those slow, golden evenings where the sky melted into soft oranges and purples, and the air felt just warm enough to forget the coming cold. Jack and Claire sat on the porch swing, watching Lily chalk a sun onto the sidewalk, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Claire sipped from her mug, cradling it between her hands. "You know, I've been thinking about that day at the park." Jack chuckled softly. "Which part? The teacups? The log ride disaster?" She smiled. "All of it. But mostly what it meant. How something so simple can mean everything to a kid, and to a parent who can't always afford it." He nodded, gaze following Lily. "I remember sitting in that line, thinking, maybe she'd never forget the letdown. That she'd remember the moment I couldn't give her what I promised." Claire turned toward him, her voice quieter now. "And I remember standing behind you, watching you try, even when it wasn't enough. That stuck with me." The porch creaked gently beneath them as the swing moved. "I've been thinking," she continued, "what if we created something together? A way to help families like yours get those moments. A nonprofit, local, focused on experiences, theme parks, zoo passes, museum trips, day adventures. Things that seem out of reach, but shouldn't be." Jack blinked. "You serious?" Claire nodded, eyes shining with something bigger than just an idea. "Dead serious. I've got the resources, but you know the heart of it. You'd be the soul of it. I don't want to just write checks anymore. I want to build something that matters." Jack leaned back, his thoughts racing. He pictured the single parents who came into the shop, tired but trying. He pictured the kids who deserved more than, maybe next year. "It'd take work," he said. "Time. People might not get it." "I don't care," Claire replied. "As long as you get it." He looked at her, this woman who could have done anything, gone anywhere, and she was here, dreaming with him. He smiled. "Then let's do it." Claire reached for his hand, fingers slipping naturally into his. And just like that, their dream wasn't just shared, it had roots. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, settling on the windowsill as the fire crackled softly in the living room. Jack sat on the floor, cross-legged in flannel pajama pants, while Lily, wrapped in a fuzzy reindeer blanket, hummed Christmas carols beneath her breath. The tree in the corner wasn't big, but it glowed with soft white lights and mismatched ornaments, paper snowflakes, glitter-covered pine cones. A popsicle stick angel Lily had made in first grade. Claire arrived just after dusk, her cheeks pink from the cold, a smile hidden beneath her scarf. She stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat, and handed Jack a small envelope. "Merry Christmas," she said, her voice warm. Jack opened it slowly, expecting a card. Instead, it was an itinerary 2 nights at a lakeside cabin an hour north, complete with a wood-burning stove, sledding trails, and a kitchen stocked with hot cocoa and pancake mix. "No Wi-Fi," Claire added with a grin. "Just books, board games, and the three of us." Jack looked up, stunned. "Claire, this is—" "Not extravagant," she interrupted, taking off her boots. "Just quiet. I wanted to give you something that felt like breathing room." Lily squealed. "We're going on a trip? I get to bring Captain Fuzz, right?" "Of course," Claire said, kneeling down for a hug. Jack stood, still holding the envelope. "Thank you. Really." Claire smiled but paused when he reached behind the tree and pulled out a box, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "For you," he said, suddenly nervous. "It's not fancy." Claire unwrapped it slowly, her breath catching when she lifted the lid. Inside was a carved wooden music box, smooth to the touch, stained a deep walnut brown. On top, a simple engraving. 3-figure-san adult man, a woman, and a small child holding hands beneath a swirling sky of stars. When she turned the tiny brass key, the soft notes of the carousel tune played faintly, delicate and nostalgic. Her eyes filled, blinking fast. "I made it in the shop," Jack said. "Took a few weeks." Claire looked up, her voice thick. "It's perfect." And for a moment, time seemed to pause, wrapped in warmth, music, and the quiet kind of joy that only comes when love is given, not bought. The air was crisp and full of the familiar scent of kettle corn and funnel cakes as they stepped through the gates of Everbright Park once more. Snowflakes melted on contact, the ground dusted with a thin layer of white, making everything feel a little more magical, a little more like a memory unfolding in real time. Lily wore her favorite knit hat with the floppy bunny ears, her cheeks rosy, eyes wide with wonder. Everything looked just as she remembered, the carousel spinning in slow rhythm, music drifting through the air, and the towering castle glowing faintly in the distance. But this time, she stood between Jack and Claire, holding both their hands. They weren't in a rush. There were no long lines or racing hearts. Just the three of them, moving as one, like they'd always belonged that way. "Remember this ride?" Jack asked as they passed the log flume, giving Claire a sideways grin. Claire groaned dramatically. "Still drying off from the last time," Lily giggled. "That was the best ride ever." They made their way to the same bench by the fountain where it all began. Jack sat down and Claire followed, Lily still between them. She looked up at them both, her mittened hands tightening around theirs. "I have to tell you something," she said, very serious now, as if rehearsing it in her head. Jack leaned in, eyebrows raised. "What's on your mind, Bug?" Lily looked at Claire, then back at Jack. "I used to wish really hard, like every night before bed. I wish that one day you wouldn't have to be alone anymore." Jack's breath caught. "I wished for someone who could laugh with you and eat pancakes with us and go on rides and just stay." Claire blinked, her eyes suddenly glassy. "And now," Lily said, beaming, "I think my wish came true." Silence followed, but not the heavy kind. It was the kind filled with unspeakable warmth. The kind that holds more love than words know what to do with. Jack reached out and gently wrapped his arm around both of them. Claire leaned into him, her hand still clasped in Lily's. And in that moment, there was no question, no doubt, they were a family. The morning sun cast the same soft light it had months ago, glinting off the ticket booth windows and painting Everbright Park in a warm golden glow. The line at the gates moved slowly, filled with parents tugging at strollers, kids bouncing on toes, and the unmistakable buzz of a day full of promise. But this time, Jack wasn't counting cash behind Lily's back. He wasn't wondering if he could afford a memory. This time, he stood with Claire's hand in his, Lily perched on his other side, her sparkly backpack bouncing as she chattered about her strategy for conquering every ride before lunch. The park hadn't changed much. The smell of cinnamon and popcorn still danced on the breeze. The music still floated from hidden speakers. But everything felt different. Because they weren't just visiting today, they belonged. Claire handed over the ticket season passes now, purchased quietly weeks ago with a smile and a nod. The attendant recognized her, gave a polite wave, and scanned them in without fanfare. Jack didn't flinch this time. He didn't worry about what anyone thought. The weight that used to sit so heavy on his shoulders had shifted. Not disappeared, but no longer something he carried alone. Lily took both their hands and pulled them forward through the turnstiles, bouncing with energy. "Let's do the teacups first. No, wait the rocket ride. No, wait everything." Claire laughed, adjusting her scarf. "We've got all day, Captain." Jack looked at the spot where they'd stood that first time, back when he thought he was just giving his daughter a few hours of happiness. Back when Claire was just a stranger with a generous heart, now she was so much more. He reached over and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She smiled up at him, eyes full of everything they'd been through: hesitations, laughter, silence, truth. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Jack glanced down at Lily, who had already begun mapping their route with her finger on the park map. Then back at Claire. "That sometimes," he said, "the smallest moment becomes the whole story." Claire squeezed his hand. "And this story?" Jack grinned. "Feels like it's just getting started." And together they stepped forward, not as strangers, not as halves, but as a family. From one day to forever.